we have a lot of show news just because the kids are out and about filming a little bit more. They're a little bit more active on their socials right now with filming being a thing, and they are constantly like sharing updates from Rick as well, because we also have a book that just launched. So we got a lot going on in the Percy Jackson fandom right now.
Yeah, there's so much. Like, I guess we can start with like book news. Is that Rick announced that The Sun and the Star is the book that he wrote with Mark Oshiro, which was about Nico and Will. And he announced at one of his book events for the Percy Jackson book he just put out that they wrote, not only are they doing a sequel, they already wrote the sequel and they're already editing the book. So like Mark Oshiro like tweeted and was like, I'm sorry, but not sorry for gaslighting you all for the last year about like if there's going to be a sequel or not. And so that's great. Like, it's really fun to have like more books of Nico and his boyfriend. That usually means that there probably will be more queer people or more of the queer people that we already have, because that's what that book was essentially about when it really comes down to it, in a great way. And so that's great. I'm assuming that will probably come out sometime next year or something. I think it's funny that people make jokes about how much Rick Riordan writes. Like, how does he write so much? And I'm like, look, I'm pretty sure he's just that sort of neurodivergent where when you have like a thought, you have to get it out.
Yeah.
Or like you feel like you're going to die. That's also me. Like, so I get it. It's like, if you have an idea, you have to do it. And he can do it whenever he wants now. There's nobody stopping him.
Yeah, exactly. Once you get to a certain place, you just keep going. Like, what's that like thriller author you see everywhere?
Oh, yeah. He uses a ghostwriter though, because there's this one guy, I forget his name. He puts out 4 books a year.
Is that the name I'm thinking of?
I don't know, but there's just no way that anyone could put out that many books a year. Not John Grisham, but somebody like that, like in that general genre. They definitely put out books where they literally just say that it's co-written by somebody else. And this book is co-written by Mark Oshiro, so it's not all Rick doing it, which makes it easier to get done. And so then the other book stuff is Curse of the Triple Goddess. I think it's so funny that the last couple weeks I was talking about like not liking when people would say like, oh, Percy needs to say that he's traumatized or whatever in this new book, and if he doesn't, then he's not traumatized. And like the main reason why that made me so annoyed is that Rick Riordan does such a good job of like complex PTSD rep, not like normal, I guess, PTSD. I don't mean to say that in like a way to make it sound like normal PTSD is easy. And you can have both. Like, I'm pretty sure I have both. And I could argue that Percy has both about different things. Like, I think he has PTSD about Tartarus, for example, but has complex PTSD for like other lifelong things. But finding like what people have told me about Curse of the Triple Goddess, like the book, I feel like the book itself is like the best evidence you could possibly ever have that he is traumatized, and you don't need him to say that he has PTSD or anything, because you just sound like a fucking fool.
Yeah.
Because like I see so many posts of people being very emotional about this book, like the book making them cry and needing to like take a break after it's over, after they're done reading it, because Percy is fucking depressed. Like, this book is right after he comes back from Tartarus, so that's very understandable why he feels like that. But the general storyline of the book is about like, it's all very like senior year sort of themes. And so like this past one was about how it's okay to age, because they were looking for like something that is supposed to keep you young forever. Okay. And this book is about like making decisions, and like Hecate in the book is basically like frozen. Like her house is literally like falling apart. The like animals she has in her house are being hurt and not helped because she's frozen by trauma she experienced in her life, where she's like not making any decisions and not moving forward. And it also has a whole storyline with Percy and Grover, where like that's the big storyline of the book with the like the personal relationships with the characters, is like Grover feeling like Percy, when he moves to California to go to college, that he's just gonna forget about him.
Yeah.
And Percy being like, no. And like definitely having a bit of like minor panic attack moments about Grover thinking that about him, and that thinking that he could even do that. And so like there's like somebody told me that there's a scene in this book where Hecate like makes him feel the pain that she felt about what happened to her during the Troy like war.
Okay.
And because that's like the pain that she's like never been able to like move past. And so she like shares it with him to have him understand like what she's feeling basically. And when he somehow during the process of that, he sees himself as like a little kid, and he makes the comment that that he hates being a little kid because it reminds him of when he was powerless living with Gabe.
Oh.
And I was just like,
Poor
I'm
baby.
I'm done.
PTSD right there. That's all we needed.
Yeah, like I'm done. All I have to do is get this book and then take pictures of all these different quotes and just like post them online. There's another part when Grover does something that upsets like their plan basically, and he grabs onto him and he says that he doesn't remember doing it, and says like, my hands went numb and I couldn't remember when I did this. And I was like, that's a literal dissociation. That's the definition of dissociation. Your hands even go numb sometimes when you do it. And I'm like, that's not even like pretending or whatever. Like the thing that makes people cry in this book too is that there's this entire part of the story of this Hecate's house and stuff is that she has like polecats and hellhounds. And but they're like beings that were turned into those things, and she hasn't been like helping them to, you know, not be stuck like that or be helped with whatever situation they need help with. And he finds like a baby hellhound, like a puppy hellhound at some point, like not at her house, and he just starts crying.
Oh.
And because the hellhound is like hurt somehow and needs help, he starts crying so much that like Annabeth and Grover like help him bring it back to Hecate's house because he's fucking crying over this puppy being hurt, and they like nurse it back to life. And that puppy is like a major character in the book because of course he's going to love it forever and doesn't want anything bad to happen to it. And I was just like, yeah, this is every like overwhelmed person with complex PTSD.
Yeah.
Like just trying to figure out how to live their life when everything is like really hard. And it's so nice to like, honestly, it sounds weird to say this maybe, but it's so nice to see somebody traumatized like that. But it's so nice to see a character like this that's written in this way, where he's the hero of the story, he's the perspective, you're literally in his head when you're reading these books. And so you're supposed to have empathy for him, and everyone has a lot of it for him. Like the amount of videos I saw of people crying because Percy cried in this book was a lot. And so that's like the best rep I could ever ask for when it comes to complex PTSD, is for people to remember that we're human and that our like lives are very complicated, and it's not quite as easy as, oh, just like go and get help and then you'll be fine. That's never how this works. And so it's just very nice to see Rick continuing that on. And it is also a good theme for kids, especially at the age when you're like getting ready to graduate high school and stuff. There is a lot of difficult stuff of like, am I making the right decision with my life? And so I'm really interested to see like what theme he goes with for next year's probably book that's going to be the last one in this trilogy.
Yeah. And like, just to give everybody perspective, we're a long way off from reading these on the podcast. I don't know about you personally, but I'm still like, I've only read the first 5 ever. So I have a lot to catch up on before I get to things that Rick is currently writing. But I mean, the whole purpose that we have of doing this podcast is to talk about trauma in a very accessible way. And that's what Rick does. It's not in your face. It's not like a Dhar Mann video where the point is going to be shoved in your face. It's very digestible, and it's also a good story. And so, you know, there's the entertainment factor, there's the trauma factor, and it really feels when you read these that Rick's taken everything he's ever heard from any kids that he worked with as a teacher in his prior life, or any kids that he's even talked to in like fan letters or Q&A type stuff. Like, you can tell how much he cares. And so, yeah, people's weird opinions about like, we need the PTSD shoved in our face. We need to see Percy personally dealing with this and going to therapy and stuff. Nobody wants to fucking read that book. I'm sorry. Like, nobody wants to read a book of just like maybe Percy's therapy sessions if we did flashbacks, but like nobody wants to read about him going to therapy and crying and not being able to get out of bed some days.
Well, and also, I think it's like the general idea that is really what bothers me about it all is this idea that like, oh, like because he doesn't show him saying out loud that he has PTSD or whatever, or showing him going to therapy or something, that it means that he's not like learning how to get help, or the idea of like, oh, these books are supposed to be showing kids how to get help. And I'm like, these books they're just not doing it. They're doing it in the way that actually works for people, instead of it being like the narrative that usually shows, or whatever show of just, oh, just go to therapy and get some medication, everything will be fine. And it's like actually him having like a support system, like him having like his mom and his stepdad and Annabeth and Grover as like his base support system that are his family that will always be there for him, and them like helping him while he's going through a hard time and sticking with him and like defending him, telling people to back off when they're being too hard on him, all that kind of stuff, and is exactly what you need to get through complex PTSD. Like that's the kind that he has. If you want, like, maybe if there's like one event that has traumatized you, and yeah, then you could go to therapy and get help and it's a little bit easier, but for him it's his entire life. Not even just like the stuff in the Greek god world. And so it's like for him it's a much bigger idea, and it's not as easy as that. And so it's like, just because like just the example from this book, like the fact that he saw a puppy that was hurt and started crying, and his two best friends were like, okay, we're going to take this puppy with you and we're going to bring this back and fix this dog because I'm going to get my best friend to stop crying. And like that's the exact sort of response you should have when somebody with complex PTSD is upset about something like that. You shouldn't be like, go talk to your therapist about it. You should like go and help them and like make them feel understood and help them out. Even if you think that crying over a dog being hurt is over dramatic, it doesn't matter. That's how they're getting their feelings out about other things in their life. So that's what you do.
Yeah.
And that's what these books do. And yeah, like I'm not going to read these books for a long time because we're rereading them. Why would I do that now? But like I read the Heroes of Olympus series, and that was like the last books that I read. Like I read the first Magnus Chase book, but I don't really remember it anymore. And I read like the first couple chapters of the first Trials of Apollo book, and I really enjoyed it, but my complex PTSD smacked me so hard in the face after that I never finished that book. And I just stopped reading them. Like that's why I don't even remember what happened. And there's a lot in like Heroes of Olympus that I even don't remember, much less what I don't remember in these books. Like the stuff that happens in these chapters are some of the last things from this book that I have like a clear memory of what happens. It's the rest of this book. There are certain things I know happen, but they're absolute mysteries about how they actually happen because I don't remember them. And so it's way more fun to reread them this way. So if you want, like, that's why I was okay with people telling me what happened in it, because I know that it's going to be a long time before I actually read it.
Yeah.
But if you are wanting to read the books that just came out, it's still, you know, A+ Rick Riordan, Percy Jackson, Greek gods content.
Yes.
And they did say that it will somehow go into whatever happens in season 2. So there'll be like little things here or there that we'll likely notice when season 2 comes out. So that's always fun too.
To get us on to season 2 then, we have both like cast news and spoiler stuff that came out. So starting with the spoilers, there's been a lot of fan photos, fan videos and stuff of them out and about filming what we think are dream sequences, because the people that are there.
Yeah, it was really interesting. They did, just an FYI too, is I saw a tweet today from the updates account everybody follows on Twitter that said that they are filming probably somewhere outside this week too, because somebody in Vancouver noticed something else that was them in a different location. So there'll probably be more things in a week too. But the scene that people saw was them at like I can't remember the right word for it, but like right by like the water basically. And the characters, when I sent her like the pictures, I was like, the more pictures you look at this, the more insane this scene gets, because it starts off as like Percy and Annabeth and like Clarice, and you're like, okay, that makes sense. And then it's like Luke, and you're like, what? And then the next person is Sally, and you're like, excuse me.
Yeah.
Sally in the same place as Luke. And then later on, more photos came out that Daniel, Tyson, and Arian as Grover were all there. But the place that they were filming was like right by the water. And so nobody could like get like any pictures or anything like that of like the actual scene. People just kind of had photos from fans who went there filming and just took pictures of them after they were done, basically. The thing I think is really interesting about this scene is that Percy's wearing different clothes, and Annabeth for that matter too, than they are for the other things we've seen of them so far.
Yeah.
So that makes me think like I feel like there's like 2 options for what this scene is, and either way it's really fun to think about. Is that either it could be them filming the end like scene where they come back and Clarice runs away with the golden fleece and then Luke tries to kill them all. But the Sally being there, I'm just like, oh my God, like why is Sally there if that's what that scene is? That is possible, but when I saw this, I was like, I feel like this might be like Percy having like a premonition dream sort of thing. Because the reason why I think that is one thing that I don't think I ever, sometimes I think things and I never say it out loud because I'm almost like afraid that they're going to do that. And I don't want to like put that out to the universe or something. And so one of those things that I never said was when they were talking about the character of Allison, the things they said about her was that she was somebody who is on Luke's side, who used to be at camp, and that she is in like the human, like mortal world. And so the first thing I thought of, I was like, if Luke like messes with Sally, I will actually die. and so like, please no. But I thought like that would be a good story, and it would make sense why they would want to do that. Almost like watch somebody like her when she's just like out living her best Sally life, and when Percy's not around. And so I felt like that could be possible in the way that the thing I kind of wondered is another thing that Rick said in an interview this week is that he said that they're going to have flashbacks like we thought they would of when Luke and Thalia and Annabeth were together when they were younger. But the thing I thought was really interesting about it is that he said they were from like Annabeth's perspective, like not like Percy necessarily seeing them, but more like Annabeth remembering them and them showing us Annabeth remembering them. And I do think that that's kind of like a necessary thing for them to give us a lot of empathy for Annabeth when throughout this season she is being terrible to Tyson and like Percy doesn't understand why. to kind of have to have those like memories so that we like see why she's so scared of him before she actually says it like out loud. But with that, one thing that I remember saying this when we were reading Sea of Monsters is that there's like a lot of like there's like a feeling of like anxiety when they're on the Sea of Monsters, in the way that they don't know what's happening at camp, and they know the whole time they're gone that they're being attacked. They don't know who's going to survive and who's not. They don't know if like Thalia's tree is completely dead yet. And so there's this kind of this feeling of they're trying to like rush through, because and it feels different than the other books, because the other books, people at camp are okay when they're gone, but this one, they're not. And so like it makes sense in my mind for them to take that idea and to have Percy having these dreams where his mom seems to be in danger with like Luke and Clarice, and especially because he isn't sure if like Clarice is somebody that he can fully trust yet. It makes sense that he would have a dream like that and be like dreading what's going to happen when he comes back. And then at the same time, for us to be seeing these memories of that Annabeth has of Luke, where she definitely would look up to him as like her savior. And then to be like, when they come back and run into him, for the audience to be like, this is gonna really suck, for anyone who's read the books anyway, to know like when they come back, there's gonna be this moment of which one is Luke gonna do? Like, is he gonna be the nicer person, or is he gonna be like what Percy thinks? Is he gonna be like the bad person? I feel like you kind of have to do that to the audience. I feel like you have to like stomp our hearts out and make us cry watching him try to kill them all, because that end scene is such a betrayal to Thalia and Annabeth particularly, and Grover, all the people that would be in those flashback memory scenes. Like, he is so angry that he wants to make some monsters eat Grover and Annabeth as the last thing Percy sees when he's alive, because he was able to give the Golden Fleece to Clarice to save Thalia's tree before he got to take it and use it for Kronos. Like, that scene is such a huge betrayal to all of those flashback scenes. And I almost like want them to low-key traumatize their audience that way, because too many people use like the whole, oh, we're a family thing that Luke said as a way to like kind of hand wave away the things that he did. And I'm like, no, I want everyone to actually have a tiny idea of what it feels like to actually be this betrayed by somebody that you loved, because it's that like him doing this stuff is that horrible. And even if I cry watching it, I want you to make me do that.
Well, where we left off with Annabeth in the end of season 1, which is different than the books, of course, is that she saw the showdown go on between Luke and Percy, and it's more dramatic in the show for sure. What we know in the books is, she knows Percy got stung by a scorpion that Luke let loose. It's a lot less in her face, and so this version of Annabeth is probably going to be feeling much more conflicted about what went down with Luke and how that plays into what she thought, like her found family was.
And it also very well sets up stuff with Titan's Curse, because Luke in Titan's Curse does not give a fuck about what he's doing to Annabeth. Like, he manipulates her emotions to force her to be tortured and almost die for a week. So if you're gonna do that, then I feel like you have to make the betrayal she feels at the end like so brutal, which is kind of that storyline with like her being hard on Tyson and her arguing with Percy about that, and also a little bit about Luke in this book, is like she's trying to argue so much for him just for him to try to feed her to something and watch her die. And so it's like she tries so hard and it just like blows up in her face. And it's just like the best way to kind of show that like a magical version of, no, I can fix him. No, you can't. No, you can't. And it just makes it like more, I guess, anxiety inducing for the audience too, to like wonder what is going to happen, or like how, even as people who read the books, we're going to watch all those flashbacks and be in abject pain for like every single second, every single line that Luke says. We're just gonna want to fall over and die somewhere because it's gonna make it all hurt like so much more. But yeah, you should do that considering who he is.
Yeah, it's supposed to sting. And I hope that, like, because of course there's always the people who are like, oh, but Charlie's hot. Like, the actor Charlie. And, you know, I've never been one of those girls. And I don't know if it's because I'm not a straight girl, but, like, I've never been one of those girls where I'm like, this actor who plays a villain is hot enough that I'm going to forget the villainous things they are doing. Women, yes. Men, no. I've never felt that way towards a male character. And so it always baffles me, like, you know, having those conversations when I was younger, even, like, the age group that's targeted for this book. I'm trying to think of what some examples are. Phantom of the Opera, the movie version, came out when I was in high school, for example. And so, you know, people being like, oh, but Gerard Butler and him singing and being emotional. It's like, okay, but no, like, literally Raoul is the good choice here. I don't see, like, other than, you know, if we were doing Fuck, Marry, Kill, yeah, like, maybe you'd have your adventure with the Phantom, but you're marrying Raoul. Let's be real.
And I also don't understand. I'm definitely never going to understand that. Are you kidding me? Like, my entire life story is like a man getting away with stuff because people just don't think he's actually that bad. I hate all of that, like, extremely so. And used to get in fights with my friends that I had when I was in like high school and college who did date some every once in a while, that I would never understand why they would date somebody even though they knew that they were a jerk just because they thought they were good looking. I was like, who fucking cares?
Yeah.
Good looking if they're a horrible person. I just could never understand that, but I'm not going to. But I don't know. I had something I was going to say. I already lost it in my head when I was saying that. But it was just the basic idea of that, oh, I know. The other thing that people do a lot is that they think the only way that a lot of people find the heroes interesting is if you imagine what it would be like if they went bad. And like that, honestly, like, always confounds me because I'm like, why would you be happy about everything you like about the character being systematically destroyed?
Yeah.
But that's like such a thing. Like, even in this fandom, like, people are obsessed with calling Percy Dark Percy because he sometimes, one time when he was being tortured to like the absolute like cliff edge of his sanity, like, did something that he normally would never do and then was suicidal afterwards. They're like, oh, he would join Luke now. And it's like, why are you so obsessed with finding a way to make somebody who would never do that ever into a bad person or be seen as like dark or bad, when it's just him being upset for 5 seconds of his life and then beating himself up so badly afterwards that there's no way that he would ever do that ever again. Like, sometimes you do stuff like that when you're being pushed way too far. But it's like people like want that about it. Like, I see so many fan fictions written with like Dark Percy and I never read any of them because I'm like, that doesn't exist. I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know why you want him to do that. And that happens in like every fandom. Like, people loved the idea of Rey becoming evil in Star Wars, for example. That's where the whole Reylo stupidity like started off from, at least before it got really dumb. So it's like there's always things like that. And I don't get it. And especially in a story like this, like Luke, we've said this many times before about Luke, but it is just true that he portrays them in a way that most fandoms or like authors, whatever, they don't have the balls to do that.
Yeah.
And like, it would be like, I don't even know, like, well, it would be like if in Harry Potter, Ron was the person that was like secretly Voldemort the entire time. And something like that. Or if like Frodo actually went evil in Lord of the Rings, or I don't even know. I can't think of other like genres like that. Or if Rey actually went bad in Star Wars. Like, that's like the level of betrayal you get with Luke, and most things just don't make it that brutal where somebody's like close friend that they all trust, he knows all of their secrets and knows everything about them, is the one that does it. So with this sort of thing, I feel like you have to make it like as painful as possible, as to almost show like how, because not to be like depressing or anything, but when you have like people in like your actual life that betray you that badly, that is how much it hurts.
Yeah.
That is like what Luke is supposed to be. You do feel like you're about to die because you're so like sad that you can't even handle it. And so I like showing that the TV show seems to be also going in that direction, with Luke, and like rest in peace, like Charlie having to act all of that stuff out. He's gonna have a great time. It would be really great as like an actor to act all of that stuff out, but also that must be like hard sometimes to get in like the headspace of a character that is that abusive.
Yeah. Hopefully he does okay with that, especially in Titan's Curse, which I think can bring us to our next topic, which is how people are treating these child actors.
Oh, wait. Before we get into that one, the last thing that is a fun thing I wanted to make sure to say is that Thalia is going to be British, and literally, this is all I want. The tweet that I made in response to this has gotten almost 4,000 views so far, so I think that people agree. All I want is to hear Walker Scobell get to yell at her in a obviously fake British accent when they're fighting.
Yes.
After the flag fight, I want him to be like, to yell pinecone face in a fake British accent. Like, let him
Yes.
let him do it, because it will be the funniest thing that's ever happened.
I mean, they've let Walker get away with like meme-ish type stuff before, so the Jesus line is one we quote all the time, but also the fact that he's like Fortnite dancing while he's waiting in the capture the flag in the first one. So I could see them putting in like a water bottles joke, like, you know, just people making fun of British pronunciation. It would fit so well for Percy.
It's like perfect kind of like, I'm fed up, so I'm just gonna make fun of how you talk and ask you if you've had tea today or something. Why not? And the thing that I thought was also funny is that people were like, does this mean that Jason is also British? And I was like, hell yeah, Jason is British too. Let's go. Which is just funny to see people like being like, that is so different than how I pictured him in my head all these years. Now I have to like reconfigure that the next time I read books with Jason in them.
The context, I guess, is where we could start, which is that it was just Leah's birthday, Leah, who plays Annabeth. And along with it being her birthday, it was also recently, I don't know if is Momo her actual name, or is that just like what? Her name
is Momona, but they all just call her Momo.
Yeah, and she is the actress who plays Tylee in the Netflix live action Avatar. So there was like weird fan behavior happening because they had their birthday parties on the same day, and the pictures were posted of Walker at Momo's first, and like, of course, the weird parasocial fan accounts are like, but what about Leah's birthday?
Or like, oh, did nobody go to Leah's birthday? Or Leah isn't there, does that mean that she's not invited or something? When it's literally just, they both had they're wearing the same clothes in these pictures. They just went to one and then went to the next one. It's not like that big of a deal, but it's more of a thing that people feel like the need to do that sort of parasocial stuff with the actors. And we've talked about this before when we did like our general grooming episode. One of the things we talked about is how careful you have to be, not only with like the cast and how they interact with their fans like that, which is why this kind of stuff is hard. Like if they interact at all with their fans, which is why we brought up like how Andrew Alvarez was acting, it makes them feel like they are justified to know about like everything about you if you talk to them at all in that way, like you're friends. And but this situation in particular, the updates account everybody looks at on Twitter said this is how I even knew that this was even happening, and they said something about like fans need to go get a hobby and like work on how they have like a parasocial relationship with this actor, and they were meaning like fans of Walker. And when I read that, I was like, it's like almost fascinating to me in a horrible way. Fans have a parasocial relationship with him when he is not online at all. Like, what are you parasocially connecting to? Because there is literally nothing from him at all. And that is like you can imagine like looking at this situation, why it's like this. Like Friday was a day when they were filming all day. And so like if you have a friend and you're around them all the time, you're not going to post on like social media like happy birthday unless you're like somebody who likes using social media for fun. Like people like Dior and stuff like that did, but they use their social media. They just post videos for fun and interact with people that way. He doesn't do that. His TikTok account has 2 videos right now, and one of them is the new trailer for Percy Jackson. The only reason he posted the other video is because he posted the Percy Jackson video the next day. Like, he doesn't post videos like that. Even before his old account got banned for a couple months, he barely had any on that account either. And most of the videos that he did post were ones that he like posted and stuff before he started filming like Percy Jackson, and his account became like his profile became like much more, you know, out there. But like one thing that does happen with a lot of teenage actors is people make it very hard for them to maintain friendships. Because when you look at this situation, like I honestly don't know like what Walker could do in this situation. And like we were talking about this earlier today, but I generally don't know what he can do because he doesn't ever post anything about himself online at all. Like when he does post things, he doesn't say anything. Like he doesn't like write anything when he posts like a story or something on his Instagram. And sometimes I see people being like, oh, why doesn't he say anything? Or why is he so short? And it's like, because people read through and pick apart every single thing that he says. And so like, if people are going to do that, then he's just not going to say anything. And he's already basically never on social media. And there's already so many things happening where people are trying to dig into the personal parts of his life when he's not on here. And so it's like, how could he ever justify being on here in any way when he's already trying so hard not to be, to like keep his private life private, like anyone would need in order to not like lose your mind, like dealing with this sort of attention. But it's like, this feels very similar to like the Chappell Roan thing that people have been talking about lately, where people are basically mad at her because she doesn't want to have a toxic parasocial relationship with her fans. She doesn't want to tell them who to vote for. She doesn't want them to like know things about her. She doesn't want to like weaponize that parasocial like thing that she knows that exists with her fans. She wants to like have boundaries and keep it as healthy as she possibly can. And people are like upset at her about that and are saying that she doesn't know how to be a celebrity and she's not a good pop star and shouldn't be famous because she doesn't want those things. And in the same way, like Walker very obviously wants to keep a lot of his life as private as he can, but people like don't want him to be able to do that. And like just in like the last, like because I make videos about Percy Jackson, I sometimes see videos like this about him from like young fans, and I try not to think about it too much once I see them because they stress me out. But like just in the last 6 months, like I saw videos about somebody impersonating his 13-year-old little brother on Snapchat. I saw somebody who he has like his like just an example of people like going into like breaking through like his boundaries is on his social media accounts. He has who he follows as like, you know, you can do that thing where people can't see who you follow. And so he obviously does that because that is one way to like stop people from bothering and harassing people in your life, is to have them not even know who you're following. And so somehow people just by like accident happened to see a girl that he was following, and this girl is somebody who was like she was like 20 or 21, and she was like in college. Like she like the picture they posted on like a TikTok was like her in like a sorority. And like I saw multiple posts where he still had his old account where you could like tag his name, and people were like adding his name and asking him if he was dating her. And it's like, he is 15 and she is 20, 21. If that is happening, that's a literal crime. So like, I legitimately hope that is not happening, but it's more the fact that someone just happened to see somebody who he was following, and it was a girl that they don't know, and they immediately start like tagging him and asking him in the videos like, who is this? And it's like, you don't deserve to know that. Like, why do you think that he should ever explain that to you?
Like, and who are you?
Like, you just like his acting. Why would he ever explain or have to justify to you people in his life that he decides to follow on social media? And then on top of that, there's like times where recently like people somehow leaked like a recording of him playing video games with his little brother and just made like jokes about it. There's the whole crazy thing that happened with like Ryan Reynolds and stuff, and how people responded to that. And then there's also the fact that he posted something accidentally on his public account that was meant to be private. And once he deleted it and showed that he didn't want it to be public, people just posted that stuff anyway. People have posted photos of him playing like sports at his local high school with his high school like across his shirt. So there's no way that you wouldn't know. And people have asked the people who post those things to like blur out the picture of his high school so that stalkers can't show up at his fucking high school, and they don't do it, and they don't take the pictures down. People have like followed his like high school friends that have like posted photos with him just being a normal high schooler. And all of this is happening where he has posted nothing online, and people are like, and I also forgot to mention the fact that people doxed his phone number and are like texting him about things. All of this with like literally nothing. He has 2 TikTok posts, and since Percy Jackson stopped filming, he has posted nothing before the new trailer came out, like publicly for anyone to see on his Instagram, besides like stories every once in a while promoting the show, or like, you know, promoting something that one of his friends or something like that is doing,
or maybe sharing something that he was tagged in.
Yeah. And so it's like some of the things he doesn't even do that with. Like, he's been in podcast interviews that he's never posted on any of his stuff that he did. And so it's like he's doing the best that he possibly can of like trying to keep that stuff private, but people are just like barreling into that part of his life to the point that they're micromanaging basically his like social media to be like, oh, well, since Momo is a friend of his, she was in the movie, the second movie that he did when he was like a little kid still, when he was like 12 before he got cast as Percy. And so it's cool that they're both in Vancouver at the same time doing these different projects. But somehow that's turned into like this whole thing of like, oh, people don't like Leah anymore because they like her instead. Or like this, the idea of like, oh, they don't get along. And it's like, I have this like overwhelming feeling to almost like sit people down and just be like, you will never know if they don't get along.
Yeah, and you shouldn't.
No, they could hate each other and you will never know. You will never be able to tell. You will never be able to figure it out by looking at what he posts on his Instagram, what he likes and what he doesn't. You will never be able to figure that out because that is all parasocial stuff that you can never tell what somebody is doing and who they are. There are so many stories of influencers that have done atrocious things that nobody had any idea they did until somebody started talking about it. You would never know they were doing that based on their social media. Mm-hmm. Like, for me and like your like lives, for like 2.5 years of our lives, nobody even knew that we were friends because we didn't post each other. It didn't matter that we didn't because we were talking every day. We just didn't like perform our friendship because we didn't have to do that. We were just friends. And you don't need to like post it publicly like that if you don't want to. And so it's just like this, I don't know how, I guess when I look at that, I get like anxious, like watching all of this, because I genuinely don't know how he's supposed to, like, how is he supposed to stay friends with his cast? Like with who are his friends?
Yeah.
When his, like, the people who like him are not only invading his life, but they're also like saying like having these judgments about the people in his life that he has actual relationships with, and putting judgments on those people based on just things that they think is happening because of social media posts. And that stuff does affect child actors. There's lots of stories like that of, like, the biggest one I can remember is Harry Styles and Larry in New Direction, or like, what is that? What is New Direction? One Direction. One Direction. That's the name of that band. They were like best friends. Like, they were really close friends. And then people started a rumor that never died to this day that they are secretly in love with each other. And it ruined their entire friendship. They're not friends anymore and haven't been for years. And they have said in interviews that they stopped hanging out because how do you handle hanging out with somebody when every time you do and you post photos of you and your friends, people are speculating that you're having sex with each other and that you're cheating on your girlfriends to be with each other instead. And it's like, it puts so much pressure on everything that you do. And like, Walker can't stop the people in his life, like his other castmates and his other friends or even his siblings, from posting pictures of him online. But every time he does, like, something like this happens that is not something that he can control. And so I don't know the answer to this, but I just wish that people would stop putting so much pressure on not only him, but the rest of the cast. Because at some point, if you keep doing that, they're not going to share anything with you anymore. Yeah. Because it's going to be like, if I was Walker at this point, I would literally never go on social media. Like, I would be so afraid of looking at it, of not knowing. Like, one thing that happened that I forgot to mention is that just made me sad is they did an interview with Josh Horowitz, I think his name is, for when they were at Comic-Con, when it was just the trio. And it was like a longer interview they did with him. Just talking about Percy Jackson and stuff. And during the interview, there was this clip that a lot of people were posting on TikTok where Leah was like just answering a question, and they were sitting on a couch. And like, Walker put like his arm like behind the couch, like you do when you're just like moving, when you're like listening to somebody talking. But he put his arm like behind the couch where like Leah was sitting. And you can see him clearly in the video realize that he shouldn't do that because that might make people like start talking about him and Leah. And so he like quickly like brings his arm back, and he looks like almost like awkward, like trying to see like, did anybody notice that I did that? While also trying to listen to what Leah is saying to him, because she's like talking to him while all of this is going on. And like, people posted that as like a joke, but I'm like, he is like being so careful about everything he does around his female like cast member, because everyone is reading so much into everything that he does. I can't actually imagine being under that sort of pressure where you have to like be so careful about every single thing you do and every single thing you say. But I have been in therapy for a long time from having to go through that when I was a teenager, even if it was very different circumstances. It was the same general idea of being under that sort of pressure. And it's fucking horrible. And yeah. I really hate the idea of any of these kids feeling like that when they're doing something that they love.
Yeah, well, and this pressure is going to happen regardless of all of these stupid little breadcrumbs people are reading into online, because their characters are going to fall in love. That pressure is automatically built into their roles because people are going to be curious, how does the chemistry build between them? What's that chemistry going to look like as the characters get more and more romantic with each other? It's why we see actors that were in movies together getting together. Sometimes it's PR, but sometimes it's actually they were close quarters and had to act like a couple for so long that it just works. We see it with musicians, where they work on a project together and then suddenly they're dating. And so they're at an age, because Leah just turned 15 too, right? And Walker's 15 going on 16. They're at that age where they're trying on dating. They're learning what their preferences are, what kind of partner they want to be with, all of that. And to have this media speculation around it and to have the pressure of, oh, our romance has to look real on top of that, like, that's so much for a young kid to deal with. And we don't need that, even if it's just like an Instagram account that has a few hundred followers saying that shit.
Yeah, they just don't. It's so hard to deal with that sort of pressure, like when you already don't know, like what you're doing really, or what's going on when it comes to that sort of stuff at that age anyway.
Yeah.
And so on top of it, the idea that you know that everything you do, all these people that have never met you before are gonna like talk about it, and especially the way that it happens, where people talk about them doing things that I'm sure in the moment when they were doing it, they didn't think it meant anything. It's just them being like, you know, people, like, and just being normal people, and that's just how people act. But now because they're under this sort of pressure, they have to like think so much about everything they do. It's just, it would be really hard to, not only with like even ignoring like the romantic side of it, it would be very hard just to like stay friends with people. When every time you do hang out, like people have all of these different ideas about what is really going on.
Yeah.
Like you gotta give them time to be able to just like be themselves so that they can figure out who they want to be, instead of like trying to make them be who you want them to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And like we talk a lot about how this show feels like it's undoing some of the childhood trauma that was done to our generation when they were child stars. If we want that to continue, we also have to treat them better as child stars. We have to not start rumors about them. We have to not put so much pressure on their personal lives and just let them work. You know, like these kids want to work. They like the work they're doing. They're enjoying it. Let's let them have fun.
Yeah, and especially I always get like this about Walker because he had such little time acting before all of this happened. Like all the other kids involved in the show grew up basically in around Hollywood or in LA or acting since they were kids or being involved in the industry somehow. He didn't have any of this stuff. And he has even said in interviews recently that, you know, he's still new at this. He's the star of this whole production, but he's still he's only worked on 4 productions so far, including this one. And so it's like, can you maybe give him some time to even figure out what the fuck he's doing?
Yes.
In like his job, in life in general, before like putting all of these like expectations on him, because the thing that sucks is that there's no way for anyone to ever live up to these. And so at some point he's going to do something that disappoints people, and they're going to like get mad at him for something when it's like, what have I even done to like disappoint you?
Yeah.
Because you don't actually know me. You're all doing this based on like what you think I'm like, based on like my like Disney sort of like persona that they have to put out on social media.
Yeah, like let's stop reading into the breadcrumbs that he's giving us by not posting, and let him just live.
Yeah. Like, look, 2 of his friends had their birthdays on the same day, and he went to both of their parties, and one of them just posted immediately, and the other one waited the next day and then posted. That's all that happened.
Yeah.
Can we relax?
Yeah, and judging by Leah's outfit and stuff, she was probably like yassifying the pictures a little bit. Yes, she needed her time, okay?
Yeah, they were like, hers was like posed photos, while like Momo's was just like them going out to eat. Like, honestly, the thing that was funniest about Momo's was, I said to you, like, I'm just picturing like a teenage girl walking into this restaurant in Canada, in Vancouver, Canada, and seeing like the cast of Avatar: The Last Airbender and Percy Jackson just sitting there eating ice cream and just like falling over dead right there. Because like there's pictures of like Charlie and Walker and like the kid who plays Aang just like hanging out, and I'm like, this is, if like a fan saw this, it would be like the holy grail of their life.
Yes.
And so it's supposed to be just fun when you see this stuff, because it's fun to see them being normal kids still, while also doing like being in a more adult world like the film industry and things like that. That's all this is supposed to be, not like some sort of discourse about what you think is happening between them personally.
Yeah, it literally does not matter.
No, it does not matter.
We are going to get into the chapters in Titan's Curse. And we kind of stalled a little bit because these are intense chapters. It feels like we're at the heavy action part of the book at this point. So, yeah, let's see. So we started with chapter 13, which is We Visit the Junkyard of the Gods. And so this is after the kids get on, was it the Eurynthian boar? Am I remembering that right? They get on that board, Erymanthian, that's how it's said. So they took the boar and they finally ride into sunset, which is kind of funny that Percy describes riding, or the after effects of riding the boar, not exactly riding it, but that they all kind of were sore because they're literally sitting on a boar that doesn't have any sort of saddle or anything. Yeah, and what did he describe it as? It was there was a way he described it that was super funny, but I didn't underline it. But yeah, it was not an enjoyable ride, and they get out and they're in Arizona. Let's see. I feel like we can kind of skip to the action, which is that, let's see, after some talk about Pan and stuff, the action scene, or wait, no, there's something big that happens before the action scene. While they are camping out and talking about the next steps, that's when they finally decide to go back to Bianca and be like, okay, back to what you said about the development of Washington, D.C. Because you said over a summer they built an entire subway system in DC. So let's go back to what happened in your life. And Bianca's like, okay, well, I was at a hotel for a little bit. And then when I came out, we went to the school that you guys found us at. And I think Percy realizes it first, but he shares a glance with Grover of like, they went to a mysterious hotel and time seems to have disappeared. We know this because we went there 2 years ago.
I loved how he's like, was your hotel called the Lotus Casino by any chance? Yes. And she's like, yeah. And him and Grover are like, what? And everyone else is like, I don't know what this means, but you guys are both like...
Talia doesn't know what it means, but I think Zoe knows what it means.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, what the fuck?
Yeah, because then Zoe asks the question that really lays it out, what's going on. And she's like, who is the president? Or who is the current president? And Bianca answers correctly with the current president, but she's like, okay, who was the president before that? And she says FDR. Like, yeah. Which, like, that's such a huge jump when you think about it, because FDR was the 30s, right? But so there's probably so much new technology that she encountered once she got out of the Lotus Casino. There was probably even the cars would be looking vastly different. The buildings would look vastly different. And it sort of makes sense that like a 10, 11-year-old wouldn't really pay attention to these things that much. But it doesn't at the same time. You're like, wait, you had to have noticed things were very, very different.
And you just ignored it. Especially, you can kind of understand how that could happen because of how the casino works. Like, I'm remembering the scene in, like, the TV show where he forgets who Grover is. And he's like, wow, Grover's really old. And he's talking about, like, the other satyr that's in there. And it's like they were only in there for like not even an entire hour, and he forgot what Grover looked like, who's been his friend for like an entire year. Imagine if you were in that casino for like 70 years or something like that, like what that would do to like your memory and how that would make you just like forget so many things that you don't want to think about anyway. Like the thing about this that I liked is that they literally had to basically almost like force her to talk about it, because she just kept being like, I don't want to talk about what my powers are. I don't want to talk about my childhood. I don't like thinking about any of this stuff. And so like there's like a part of her brain that knows that none of this makes any sense, and there obviously is something else that was going on. But until like a bunch of people make her like actually sit down and she's not allowed to like run away from the conversation, she finally like figures it out, and it's just like one of those moments where you're like, what is happening? Like,
Yeah.
how old are you actually?
Exactly. And so they start asking her more questions, because this is when all of them are starting to realize what's going on. And then they are interrupted by headlights of a car. And so Percy says he was hoping it's Apollo again, because at least Apollo was helpful a little bit last time. But it's not Apollo. It is somebody who directly pulls up and squares up to Percy, his old pal Ares.
I hate him so much. And of course, like, reading him, like, putting his knife to Percy's throat, I'm like, fuck you, bro. Like,
Yeah.
that's the first thing you do is, like, I gotta show my dominance to this 8th grader because I'm that strong.
Yeah, it's like, okay, we just do this automatically when we see each other now. Okay, sure.
I guess.
Yeah, so let's see. Percy realizes it's Ares, immediately is angry, just how Ares makes him feel. And Ares says, I want you to come with me. You got to meet somebody. And so, you know, they're kind of pushing for all of the group to go, but he's like, no, it just has to be Percy. She's especially not going to want to see those two. And he's referring to Zoe and Bianca, which it makes sense for who he's meeting with. He's meeting with Aphrodite. Aphrodite takes celibacy very personally. And so even if Bianca and Zoe themselves are not strict ace aro, the fact that they're chosen to be celibate is something she would have a problem with.
Yeah, and also, like, the hunters were, like, walking around camp telling Aphrodite children that love is a waste of time.
Yeah.
So, no, Aphrodite's not going to want to talk to you.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very combative, the relationship that they seem to have with each other. And I'm pretty sure Rick goes with the version that Aphrodite is a Zeus child. And so there's probably like a little bit of sibling rivalry intended to be in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, let's see. Let's see. I thought one thing that I underlined before we get strictly to the Aphrodite part is before Percy gets the reveal, Ares says, get inside, punk, and mind your manners. She's not as forgiving of rudeness as I am, which actually I would say is true. Ares is, he almost is a mercenary type, because you tell him you want him to go fight somewhere, he's going to go fight there. And especially if you are a person that has more pull with him, like Aphrodite. But Aphrodite's the one who plans things out, who does really sadistic things to people who are either chosenly celibate or say that they are above love or whatever it may be. And so, yeah, I would say she's not as forgiving as Ares, despite the fact that he is the god of war.
Yeah, the worst myth that I know of so far when it comes to people who are asexual like me is involving what what Aphrodite does to somebody who says that they are ace and aro. That's, when I read that, I was like, that's actually fucking horrific because that's actually things that happen to real life people who have that sexuality sometimes without like the magical stuff attached to it, but still that's not that different of an experience. And I was just like, dear God, you're the god of love, and you are this black and white about it all, that you think that we don't love anybody just because we don't have maybe romantic feelings. Like, that's not, you should know more than anyone that that's not true.
Yeah, and it has to do with, for whatever reason, like, I do think that, at least in earlier mythology, that Aphrodite was supposed to be strictly erotic love. She was supposed to be eros. And there is a recognition of the importance of, like, I guess, attraction, of physical and sexual attraction in mythology, in that Eros, the god Eros, and not Cupid Eros, there's a primordial god Eros, is one of the first three. And like, it's kind of a big statement of, yeah, you need this force to create more forces. It's a procreative force. And Aphrodite somewhat takes over that once we get into the later generations of gods. I would say that people didn't start talking about love as a broader topic other than romantic love probably until much later in mythology. So it feeds into this image of her, and I think it's why Rick is so easily able to pull out like things that we've seen of her in mythology that make her feel more like a teenage mean girl than they do a goddess of love.
Mm-hmm. I know that people don't like sometimes that he does that with her, but I always have very different opinions about everything to do with like romance or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so for her, like the depiction of this scene that she has with Percy, where she is more like that, more like mean girl, almost like she's like watching like smash two dolls together and just like having fun, seeing like the chaos she causes in their life and things like that, not considering that they're like actual people with like their own decisions that they would like to make, not just because she thinks it's fun watching like her version of a soap opera. I think that reminds me a lot of what people would say to me, especially when I was in college. Like so many people when I was like college age and a couple years after that, they would try to convince me to like date someone or have sex with someone all the time. And that they thought that the way that they talked about it was like, if I did that all of my problems in my life would just go away. Which is so ironic when it comes to my life. That's like the literal basis of all of my life's problems is actually that stuff. And so that's not going to make anything go away. But that's the way that they would talk about it with me, of like, oh, if you just like do this one time, you'll feel great and everything will be better and like you'll be fine. And it felt like very like overwhelming when people would say that stuff to me. And it also just felt like, stop trying to force me to do something that I don't want to do. And that just makes me not do it even more when I feel like people are trying to get me to do something that I don't like. I'm telling you no, and you're like trying to get me to do it anyway. So that's what this scene like reminded me of when it came to that, because this scene where she's like trying to basically trying to, it's very weird. She's like telling Percy, you have romantic feelings for someone, when he doesn't know that yet himself, but she's like telling him that she does. Like, this is like a trope that happens in a lot of fan fiction stories, and I also hate it when it's there, because it's like that just doesn't, people don't like that. People don't like it when you tell something about them that they don't know, and especially if it seems like you're almost making fun of them by them not knowing what you're talking about. Yeah. Or not realizing what they mean. Like, people did that a lot with me too, and I was just like, what do you know about me that I like don't know about me? Like, where you're like talking to me like this is really weird, and it just makes me feel really uncomfortable. And that's basically what this scene reminded me of. And I remember the first time I read these books in like 2010, when I read this book the first time, this is the scene where I was like, oh, they're gonna make them be romantic. And up until this point, I didn't think that they were doing that, because I always want them not to. Just because that's just what I'm like. I don't need romance to have like a love story that I'm very invested in. And so I always, whenever I read anything, I always kind of hope that if they do that, it doesn't have to be that much, or they just don't do it at all. And so I think it's one of those funny things that people make fun of, like Walker, because he didn't realize when he was 9 that they were romantic until they like kiss in like the next book a little bit. But that time when they kiss is like, if I was Percy, I wouldn't realize that was something that actually meant anything because of the context of the scene that happens in either. Yeah. But it's also like, no, this was me. I was 25 and when I was reading these books, and I also was like, I did not realize until right now that I was supposed to pick up on romantic subtext between these two children. Yeah. And I was like, I did not think that was happening. And so I've seen so many people be like, oh, they went through the tunnel of love. And I was like, I don't care it's a ride. Was that supposed to mean something? Like,
Yeah.
I just didn't pick up on that at all. And so this scene always like grates on me because I don't like Ares, and I definitely am not going to like this version of Aphrodite. And I just don't like how they just show up and they're like, oh, you're secretly in love with your best friend and you don't even know it yet, but I do.
Yeah.
And so I like force things to happen for you to go on this quest so that you can like have a romantic story with your friend that you're not even sure you have feelings for, that is being tortured right now. And it's like, I think he has enough to deal with. Like during this conversation, he's like, they're like, why are you on this quest? And he's like, because the world is about to end. He's like, because we have to save Artemis. They're like, you don't care about that. And it's like, well, I don't want Annabeth to die. And they're like, oh, why do you don't want Annabeth to die? And it's like, because she's my best friend. Like, I feel like a crazy person when I say this stuff, but like, you can have strong enough feelings for somebody in your life where you are willing to do the things that Percy does for Annabeth in this book without the predication that you're secretly in love with them.
Yes.
You can just love your friends that much or love other people in your life that much.
Yeah, and especially because we're talking about neurodivergent, traumatized children who do not have a strong, supportive nuclear family. This is their found family.
Yeah, like even like, I know I've said this to you before, but like if some crazy emergency happened with you where you would need me to be in California, I would just ask my mom to give me money and she would give me money. And I would go to California and I'd be like, bye. And like, I wouldn't care if anybody else was mad at me. I would just do that because I don't need to be secretly in love with you in order for that to happen. We love each other because we are friends. And like friendship and like platonic love is sometimes more powerful in different ways than romantic love because there isn't like the societal sort of norms of being in a romantic relationship and going on dates and things like that make you stay connected. You have to put in a lot of effort in order to do that because there's no reason for you to like see each other, you know? You have to like actually figure something out on your own. And so like, I'm obviously fine and happy with Percy and Annabeth getting together at the end of the last of these books. But I feel like sometimes people are too focused on that, about their characters, where they make everything they do about that. Like, I see people sometimes say, like, oh, Percy turned down being a god for Annabeth. And it's like, no, he turned it down because he doesn't want to be one, because he wants to actually live his life. And, like, yeah, Annabeth is part of his life, and he loves her, and he wants to be able to actually be in a relationship with her and not abandon her like that. But he also wants to live his own life. It's not purely just about her, and the same way that her life and her decisions are not purely just about him. Yeah, that's a giant romance rant. There's going to be more of those later on. I get so frustrated by that stuff.
Yeah, and I know we're supposed to feel the tension building because this really is like things that he's been putting off in his head. Because of course he started out wanting to go on this quest to save Annabeth. He knows that, you know, we know that as the audience, but he very quickly shifted to, whoa, some big shit is happening on Olympus, and Artemis being gone is a huge danger to all of the war stuff that's about to happen. So we also have a huge fire to put out. And I do think that for Percy, it became a matter of the quest is just a means to save Annabeth, but the quest is important in and of itself.
Yeah, like that, and that's how Percy feels about every quest. Like,
yeah, the last one it was Grover. Yeah,
the last one it was like, okay, we have this quest, but it's about Grover. The first book, it was, yeah, we have this quest, but I want to help my mom. The fourth book, it's like, oh, we have this quest, but the quest is basically trying to help Camp. And so there, most of the time when there's quests like that, that's why he goes. He doesn't go for like the good of the quest necessarily in that way. Like, he goes because he cares about the people that will be affected, but he's not going because he wants to like be a hero or something, you know? There's always like a personal connection. Like for him, it's like, well, people at camp are going to die, and like the people on this quest are going to die, and gods that I've talked to before will be hurt, and I will feel bad if that happens. So I want to help them. It's not in like the way that maybe other people feel about that stuff. That's just not where his motivation is.
Yeah, so the conversation with Aphrodite, as we said, it was her saying, "You're on this quest for love, and I'm always here for love, so I'm gonna help you out." And she tells him she's the reason that he's there. She's the one who provided the poison that the Stoll brothers used on Phoebe, the hunter's shirt that she got, that took her out of the quest. And that she is also the one who sent Blackjack the Pegasus. But she says her reason for doing this, and this is in a quote, "It's been ages since we've had a good tragic love story." And
he's like, tragic? I don't want to be tragic.
Well, and so we have Annabeth, who's literally in mortal danger right now. We also have, they're on this quest where they found out someone's dad is killing them, someone's gonna be lost, and like, I mean, there's also the overall large prophecy of one of the big three kids is going to have to do something crazy at this point. So what part of it's going to be tragic? That is a big open-ended question for somebody who's neurodivergent and was probably going to ruminate on that. And then, let's see, love conquers all, Aphrodite promised. Look at Helen and Paris. Did they let anything come between them? And Percy's like, the Trojan War. Like,
didn't they start the Trojan War and thousands of people died? And she's like, I don't care.
And I've done a video on Helen and Paris. I did a little bit of the Trojan War. I never finished that series because I always lose steam anytime I'm like, I'm going to take on the entire Trojan War. It's just a lot to take on. But essentially, in Homer, we have scenes of Helen being like, I don't want to fucking go to Paris's side, and Aphrodite being like, no, you're going to go over to his bed right now, little girly, because I said so. And so, like, she didn't even really love him per se. She was sitting there while watching people fight on the battle lines. Like, she was sitting on their high walls thinking, like, I kind of want Menelaus to win this battle against Paris right now so I can go home. So, yeah, it's a shitty example. I mean, the other example that's kind of prevalent throughout this book is Jason and Medea, which is another instance of Aphrodite putting a spell on a girl and it causing a bunch of drama. So, yeah, it is truly tragic when Aphrodite gets involved. And I know this is already spoiling, like, what we're going to talk about next chapter, but, like, the fact that Rachel Dare comes into the picture right after this was like, oh, she knew. She knew that there was going to be a theoretical triangle.
Yeah, she probably set it up that way because everyone likes love triangles on soap operas. Yes. And that's basically how she's treating their lives. Exactly.
Yeah, and
she reminds me so much of the, like, enmeshed, like, mom who is, like, you know, giving people all these opinions about their love life. And it's like, why are you excited about watching teenagers date? Like, he's in 8th grade. I'm not sure he's even old enough to really date. And you're, like, trying to, like, force him to date his best friend before he would ever be ready to do something like that. Like, while also all of the other gods are arguing about whether they should kill him or not. And it's like, what is happening right now?
And, yeah, so she says, I have some wonderful surprises in store. Anguish, indecision. Oh, you just wait. So yeah, she literally is setting him up for a soap opera style romance. And he's just now supposed to go with it because she's like, I'll help you out so that you could get a little bit further on this quest for my entertainment, essentially. Yeah, so, and then just as quick as this whole interaction with Ares and Aphrodite starts, he gets pushed out of the car right after she's like, okay, I'm gonna have my fun with you, bye. Yeah.
And they basically say, like, don't take anything from my husband's place. And he's like, what about Hephaestus?
Yeah, he's like, yeah, because I mean, it's the one dig he could get in here is like, yeah, your husband's Hephaestus. Like, what about him?
Yeah.
And it's so quick, but okay. So what I thought of with this too is this kind of changes. Like, it's going to be weird in the show because we've had Hephaestus already, and the one instance we have had of Hephaestus has been super helpful. So it's a little interesting, like how we're now getting a scene where Hephaestus is almost the center of why it's so chaotic. He's the person who creates the next monster that they encounter. And so that's kind of an interesting dichotomy for me, is that he's been the most helpful Olympian in the TV show, and then the next time we're going to hear about him in the books is this scene where it's his junkyard, and like, yeah, he's not present, but like he kind of is because it's his place.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of the whole thing with these books that even the gods that you like they still do things that are not the best, even the nicest ones. Like, and Hephaestus is one of the nicer ones, but he's also one of the gods. So there are things that he does that do complicate their lives a lot.
Yeah, he says that the only reason he's not taking Percy out in this moment was because word on Olympus is that you might start the biggest war in history. I can't risk messing that up. So, like,
God, I hate Aries.
yeah, okay.
I could beat you up, but I won't because I'm busy. That's Aries.
Let's see. So, I underlined something in this next part. I kind of want to read a little bit of it out. But when Percy then gets back, they of course are all asking, what was that all about? Like, what happened? And Percy lies, and he's just like, oh yeah, they were telling me to be careful not to pick anything up in the junkyard. And so he's like, Aphrodite wouldn't come down just to tell you that. Yeah. And Talia's like, yeah, she wouldn't. And Grover starts looking at Percy funny. And I think it's really funny that he just completely forgot about the empathy link, because he's just like, yeah, I know that Grover's an empathetic person, but he's looking at me like he knows what I'm thinking and feeling right now. And it's like, bro, you're connected.
Yeah. And I like, and because it like truly, like, what did they want him to say? Aphrodite told me to hit on my best friend when she's done being tortured.
Oof, yeah.
Anyway, I was like, glad that's like the most important thing in her life right now, is to tell you that currently.
Yeah. Another funny thing that Percy says that's like, bro, are you forgetting everything? Is immediately after that, Zoe's like pointing which way they need to go. She's like, we need to go west. West is that way. And everybody's like, how do you know? And she talks about the constellations. And she's like, yeah, Ursa Major is in the north, which means that way must be west. And he's like, oh yeah, the bear thing. And Zoe says, show some respect. It was a fine bear, a worthy opponent. And Percy says, you act like it was real. Like, do you forget your whole existence, kid? You are literally a Greek myth brought to life. And all of the constellations that are named something Latin or Greek are probably coming from a Greco-Roman myth. Like, he completely forgot who he is for a second.
That's also just like, sometimes things hurt your head too much. And you're like, that can't actually be true, right? The stars can't actually be real things.
Yeah. Like, they're just balls of gas, which, like, yes, that's what us mortals think, but you're not supposed to think that anymore, Percy. Okay, so then they are in a huge junkyard. And this junkyard, the stuff in it both interests them, and they already have had this warning, don't touch it. And it takes Zoe, who is obviously the most knowledgeable of the group, being like, things don't get thrown away for no reason, for all of them to start thinking a little bit more critically of the cool junk that they're surrounded by. Mm-hmm. But of note, one of the first things to get picked up and examined more closely is a hunter's bow that Bianca picks up. It then transforms into a hair clip, which is what all of them are wearing. And the reason I think this is significant is because what is about to happen with Bianca, I feel like this for her was her moment of like, oh shit, I was told the hunters are immortal, but the fact that there's a hunter's bow in there means that there's a hunter without her bow, which means she probably isn't here anymore.
Yep.
And so I feel like for Bianca, that probably was a little wake up moment.
Mm-hmm. Feel like this is actually really serious.
Yeah.
Like people could die. This isn't just like a fun game that I'm playing.
Yeah, which like at her age and the way that everything happened so fast with her, she didn't have time to digest the reality that she's living in.
No.
And so her experience with the gods is as limited as Nico's, where he was bringing up mythomagic. And so she's like, oh yeah, so am I in Nico's game probably in her head? Mm-hmm. Or, you know, like trying to remember things that she's heard Nico say about these gods and stuff. That's the context she has to go on, and maybe a little bit from school, because I can tell you William's in 6th grade and he is just now learning about Greco-Roman mythology this year.
Yep.
So
I did that in 6th grade too. I loved it.
Yeah, so she probably has very, very little information to go off of, and she hasn't even been a hunter long enough yet to hear their stories.
Yeah. No. She doesn't actually know anything. Like, everything that happens to her in this part happens the way that it does because she is still, like, so young. Like, because they spent most of their life in the casino, she just, like, doesn't understand, like, like we were saying last week, she doesn't understand the gravity of this decision she's making. She's making decisions as, like, a tiny little 12-year-old little baby 6th grader who hasn't been, like, super traumatized by life and, like, forced to, like, mature, like, before you actually would be, like some of the other kids. And so everything she does is so, like, kind of innocent, and it just makes it all so horrible.
Yeah, so they, I feel like this moment of realization was probably on her head as she's walking through the junkyard. And eventually, just as they're right about to hit the freeway, they think they're finally clear of it. This big metal statue that they happen to see while they were in the junkyard starts following them. Mm-hmm. And Zoe recognizes it as Talos, which is an invention of Hephaestus. And really quickly, just because it is so short, I did want to read what it talks about of him. Oh no, did my laptop die while I was reading? Okay, so I could talk about the myth. But in Jason and the Argonauts, they encounter Talos, while I believe this was after Medea had already betrayed her family and they'd retrieved the fleece, but they were now looking for a place to stay. They get to Crete, and that's where they encounter Talos. And Talos is guarding the shore to make sure nobody can get in. And while he is guarding it, they notice that there is some sort of opening that's attached to a vein, and it has a nail in it on his foot. And so Medea puts him under a spell. Now, the two versions that I've read of this, one is just in the fit of madness, the nail comes out of the hole in his foot, and he starts bleeding ichor, and that's how he dies. Other versions, it's Medea purposely takes that out and tells him, like, it's going to fix him, but then he bleeds out and dies. But what Rick takes of this is that there is a hatch door on the foot labeled maintenance. And so maybe Talos has had some upgrades over the years, but he essentially is acting as kind of like a guard dog for this junkyard area and protecting the stuff in it, making sure none of it leaves. At first, everybody thinks it's Percy who grabbed something until they remember Bianca was the first to actually grab something. And so everybody's like, did you take that bow? What's going on? Hello?
I kind of liked how people blame Percy for it, of course, and he said, well, Zoe mainly, and he says, like, I didn't take anything. And then he realizes, I know I didn't take something, so I think Bianca probably did. but he like asks her like, what did you take and things like that, but he doesn't like do it in a way to try to like get her in trouble. He's just trying to figure out what it is so that they can give it back.
Yeah.
But doesn't like run to them and be like, she's the one who did it, not me, because he's more mature than that. But it does like create this whole situation where he's talking to her, he's telling her, he figures out the plan when he sees like the bottom of the foot of the robot, and it's like, oh, we can try to get inside. And I forget why. I think it's because something happens where he gets like flung across where they are and like gets like thrown into something where she ends up being the one to do it because he gets like flung too far away where he can do it.
It's both. So she feels guilty about taking something, and Percy tries to almost get it out of her, like, because he's like, throw it back, just throw it back and we'll be good. And she's like, I can't, it's already too late. And so as they're coming up with this plan, she tells him that it's a mythomagic statue and it's the only one Nico didn't have. And that's why she grabbed it. And so she's feeling guilt because she doesn't want to put it back. And she knows that she is the reason that this, that Talos is following them. And so when Percy comes up with a plan, she's like, I think I can do it. Just get it to stomp, which Percy does. But that's when he gets flung away. And I do think Percy probably either would have tried to go in with her or would have pushed her out of the way and gone in first, because that's just who he is.
Yeah.
But because he gets flung away, she ends up going through with the plan and getting inside. And this is the part where it happened so fast for me that, like, I didn't fully register, like, how it actually went down. But she gets into the foot and they notice that it's, like, now it's acting crazy. So that it's very clear she's gotten under the controls. But it was, let's see. He starts doing the funky chicken. He starts punching himself. And then the giant's ankle snared on some power lines. So electricity up through a metal statue, a giant metal statue, which, I mean, it's unclear what exactly happens to Bianca, but that electricity, either there were sparks flying around her or she might have been affected because she's literally encased in metal. And aside from that, the statue starts breaking apart. And so what ends up happening is, yeah, the statue's gone. It fell apart. She got it to stop moving on them, but they have no idea what happened to her. And then they can't even find her after it's all over. They're looking in the debris. They're trying to figure out, like, where could she have possibly landed. And Grover's the one who's finally like, you guys, we could keep looking, but I think this is the part of the prophecy that says someone will be lost in the land without rain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just so awful because, like, she does everything in such, like, a young way. Like, she realizes, oh, Nico's going to be mad at me that I abandoned him. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to bring back this toy to make him happy because, and, like, doesn't understand the whole, like, doesn't even understand the idea that, like, you've abandoned him. Like, you can never be with him. Yeah. And so, like, bringing back something like that isn't going to make him any happier, like, with you, because she doesn't understand still, like, even what her joining the Hunters really mean. And so she doesn't get that when they say if you can't take something from the gods, she doesn't understand that means you're going to die if you do. Yeah. Well, it, like, until she gets electrocuted to death. And, like, the first time I read this book, I was like, this is a children's book series. Did a 12-year-old girl just get electrocuted to death? And it's like, yes, she did.
Likely, yeah.
Yeah, she did. And, like, the first time I read this book, I definitely tried to hang on to hope that she was somehow still alive, especially because in Sea of Monsters, Tyson, like, you thought he was dead and then he comes back. Yeah. And so you want to hope that she's somehow still alive, especially because they never do find her body. this the scene at the very end of the book between Percy and Nico is so painful. And part of the many reasons why it's painful is because that was the first time I read it. That's when I really realized that, no, she's just dead and she's never coming back. And I was like, oh my fuck. But like this part is just so sad too, because every time I think about like the third season of the TV show, I just imagine watching like Walker film this scene where he's up all night searching for a 12-year-old girl's dead body.
Yeah.
And is the one arguing that they shouldn't leave and they can't leave until they find her. And everyone else has to convince him to stop. And I'm just like, this is like actually completely horrific that we're going to have to see this. And like, I like hate Rick Riordan and also love him at the same time for doing things like this. Because I feel like you just can't have a story where the main character is told that he might be stabbed to death one day if you don't have characters die along the way to make it show how serious like all of this stuff actually is.
Yeah.
And it's so horrible how this happens and how this happening like affects so many things like going forward for years. Like one little fun tidbit that I do remember from the Heroes of Olympus books is that at some point they need something from that like the gods would have, like some sort of metal or something like that the gods would have. And Leo, who is one of the newer characters, is like, oh, we can go, there's this place in Arizona where we can, and he's like in the middle of saying, oh, we can go there. And Percy is like, no, like, absolutely not. And because those books are told from a lot of the time the perspective of the newer kids, none of the younger kids understand. And Leo thinks that that's Percy being a jerk because he like immediately cuts him off and is like, no, we're not going there. And like Annabeth just like kind of tries to smooth things over by being like, that place is cursed, like never go there. And it's because of this that they don't know that this happened there. And so they think that he's just being an asshole when it's like, no, that's an extremely traumatic event for my life that I don't want to relive with some new kids that might also die. And it's just, it like affects him for a very long time. Like she told him, I joined the Hunters because of you, because you're such a nice person. Mm-hmm. And he like told Nico that he would watch out for her, and now she's gone.
Yeah.
And
well, and he was also the only one to really get through her shell so far. I mean, we have to imagine that, yeah, she's probably having conversations we don't know about with Zoe. But at the same time, the only character development of her we've gotten is through Percy, is through him having conversations where he asks her about Nico or about their past. And so it's also, you can tell he really felt for this girl. He was like, she's the same age that I was when I went on my first quest, and she made this huge decision that I don't know she fully understands. And and the added, pressure of Nico thinks I'm this crazy cool hero because I'm the first one he met, and he asked me to take care of his sister, and I didn't. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's all just... The thing that I thought was really interesting, but in the way that it was like, I thought it was accurate for their characters after this happens, is that when the next scene when they're leaving and he's talking about like how that Zoe is sitting up front with Thalia and that he is in the back with Grover, and everyone is having a lot of like emotions about everything except for Thalia. She's the only one that is like, okay, let's just move on. And like Zoe is like really upset. He's really upset. Like he literally thinks like, I need to stop being depressed because I don't have time. Because if I stay depressed, everyone else is going to die too. Yeah. And I was like, this is the definition of PTSD, that you're like putting aside your emotions because you literally don't have time to process them because other things are going wrong at the same time. I guess the thing I'm like working up to saying is that Thalia's reaction is not right. And
I interpret it a little bit differently, and I interpret it as she's feeling it, but or she's not letting herself feel it as she's
that's what I mean by it's not right. Like,
yeah.
When you see like a 12-year-old girl that you just spent time with die, like especially in this sort of way in front of you, where you knew that it was a painful death, and she didn't know, there's no way that anyone, like especially someone that young, ever deserved that sort of death. Like, you should feel emotions about that. You should be having feelings about it. And so the fact that she like doesn't feel any, to the point that she doesn't know how to talk to Zoe because she is having so many, and she knows that she can't do it. It's just such a golden child thing that like I feel like happens, because I've had conversations like that so many times with my sister growing up, where she has told me like, can you go talk to dad to get him to calm down? Can you, or even since my dad died, with my mom, like mom is really upset about something, and her being like very dismissive of it, of like, oh, whatever, I don't care what she's upset about. And then I go and talk to my mom, and we talk about whatever it is, and I kind of like understand why she's upset, because I'm usually upset like that. Or even to the point that when like our grandma died, that I actually liked, who died when I was 16, when we found out that she died, my mom and I were like crying like a lot, and she was yelling about how she didn't want to have to go to another funeral. And like that was her way of like responding to that, was being mad that we had to go to another funeral. Well, my mom and I were like crying because we were like feeling the emotions. And there's something that happens when you're like that role sometimes, that I think because you see yourself as you have to be like the leader, or almost like above everyone in some way, that it makes you like shut off your emotions. Because if you think that you're better and smarter than everybody else, then you just kind of like end up looking down on them in some way. And you just don't feel it the same way that everyone else does, who is like not looking at people like that. Because I thought it was very accurate. I thought that Thalia would be the one that would be like, Percy, can you talk to Zoe, because I can't talk to her, and I can't deal with like being close to somebody having feelings for this long. And it just like makes sense that she would feel that way. And that most of the time, at least in this book so far, the only time you really see her showing emotions is when she's angry. And those are when they realized that Bianca died, she was mad. Like she like broke something with her shield and yelled. And everyone else started crying, but she was like yelling because she was angry. And that's like the closest that she can do when it comes to like emotions, I guess. And I just was like, this is a very accurate way that this would happen. But it was just really interesting to kind of see the different ways that they all responded to how to process something like this.
Yeah, well, and the pressure that she is under specifically, that I think is keeping her in that control mode, is that so many people are looking to her as the possible big three child that the big prophecy is about. So many people are looking to her for solutions to problems, for fixing everything. And so to her, this is a big failure, even if it was already prophesized that it was going to happen and we knew going into it. And B, like, okay, well, I got to keep moving because the rest of the quest still has to happen. And maybe if I keep things going, I can keep somebody else from dying. Like, that's the benefit of the doubt, giving her the benefit of the doubt of what could be going through her head.
Yeah. And I do think that when you're in that sort of golden child, or however you want to put it, role, that there is like a level of like, you almost like resent other people because you feel like you need to handle everything. And so you resent how when other people have problems, because you're like, this is just like another thing that I have to somehow have the answer to. And when you're like the scapegoated role, you don't feel that same sort of thing because nobody listens to you anyway. And so you don't have the pressure that you necessarily feel like. You have a different sort of pressure, feeling like you need to solve everything, but it's like a different role. Like you don't see yourself as like the leader that everyone is going to necessarily, and that is your role, that you have to have all the answers. You see yourself as like, no matter what happens, I end up having to be the one to handle it. And so you like have a hard time with emotions, but you do sometimes when things like that happen, you are allowed to feel it because it just becomes like too much for you not to.
Yeah.
You don't feel the same sort of like you get angry at the people around you, but you also feel like you need to like help them and fix them all the time. And so like you don't feel as much resentment towards them, I think, in the way that you can feel. And it totally makes all the sense in the world that people in that sort of position would feel that sort of resentment. If you feel like you have to have the answer to everything and you can't ask anyone for help, because then if you do, you've like failed in some way, then yeah, you're going to resent the people around you for just being people and being upset, because it feels like this weird like judgment on you that like if they're upset, it means that you've done something wrong. And it's like, no, they just are people.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing I wanted to talk about is it's when they start going on the river and they're in their like canoes. It's fun having Thalia be like, can you really do that, bro? And him being like, yeah, I have water powers. I have water powers. I can use them. And but also just like a small thing of when Grover wanted to go on like the trail that would be scary for somebody who's afraid of heights, that Percy was just like, why don't we do this instead, in a way that like didn't show that he was doing it outwardly to like help Thalia. Thalia knew that he was and said like, thank you. But that sort of like minor manipulation is the scapegoat's like way to get through life. It's like, that's what we do with people all the time of like, why don't we do this instead and make it sound like it's for another reason, so that you don't like have to tell somebody something if you don't have to. Like he doesn't have to tell everybody that Thalia is afraid of one of her own powers if she doesn't want everybody to know. And she obviously doesn't want everyone to know.
Well, it is worth saying the cliff probably wasn't going to be a viable option because he says it's a goat path. And if you've never seen it before, anyone watching this, Google goats climbing a mountain, and they will stand on basically nothing. You know,
those pictures scare the absolute shit out of me, because I also have some like fears of heights and stuff like that. So yeah, I would not like that.
Well, an astrologer I used to like would talk about Capricorn placements as being able to do that, because you know, and I do love that metaphor, which is why I've seen that picture so much as a Capricorn moon. Like I've always been like, yeah, it feels like that's what I'm doing sometimes, you know, that I am the lone like goat standing out on this cliff that has basically no footholds. And that's what she's actually doing. That's what Talia is actually kind of putting herself through, and she doesn't need to.
No.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
The thing from this part that I really liked, besides it's always fun to see Percy talking to water animals, water naiads, I think.
Naiad, yeah.
And a little like reference to Zoe's stuff before they talk later is I just loved I loved the scene of Percy and Zoe talking, because I'm like, this is what two scapegoats sound like when we talk to each other. Like, yep, this is absolutely what we sound like when we talk to each other, where we're having a competition about which one of us is the worst person and which one of us is actually responsible for everything. And we're like, no, it's definitely not you, it's me. No, it's definitely not you, it's me. That's this whole conversation.
Yeah, so earlier with Grover, Percy was saying it should have been me, and Grover was not here for that conversation. Grover's like,
I didn't even talk about that Grover was like, dear God, I can't even handle that. Please never say that again. But that is... like I always talk about like his fatal flaw, but that is his fatal flaw there, of like thinking that he should sacrifice himself to better, that it's like the betterment of everybody else, is that he needs to do that, which is the most scapegoat thing in the entire fucking world, is doing that, is feeling like somehow if I should have just been the one to die because everyone else would have been fine without me. And thank God that like Grover is the one who heard that. Also, thank God that he said this out loud, because he usually doesn't say things like this out loud. So I'm glad this one time he said it out loud, and Grover was immediately there to be like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Like, never say that ever again. I never want to hear you say that ever again. Please, no. So I'm glad that he put that, like, try to get that thought out of his mind as fast as he possibly could. But
yeah. But we get a little insight into Zoe's self-speak here, where she's feeling this exact same thing for different reasons. And we then get her actual reason for taking Bianca on the quest. She says, I pushed her into going on the quest. I was too anxious. She was a powerful half-blood. She had a kind heart as well. I thought she would be the next lieutenant. And part of this is because of stuff that has not been fully revealed yet. I mean, we know Atlas is Zoe's dad, but we don't know that Atlas is the general yet in this book. So she was thinking ahead, because we can basically deduct at this point that she knows that that part of the prophecy is about her, or is likely about her.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, she was planning her succession. And even if she didn't know whose child that Bianca was, we now know she saw that there was something there that nobody else saw yet.
I thought that this part, I was like, because literally like last week, I was like, the only reason I can think that she would bring Bianca is because she wants to train her to like take over for her one day. And then she literally says that, and I was like, oh, I honestly didn't remember that she said that at all. And I just kind of stopped and looked at the book, and I was like, oh, good job, me.
Yeah.
Being able to read her character enough to know that about her, because I honestly didn't remember that she says this at all. But this is why I get frustrated with Zoe about how much she doesn't trust Percy at the beginning of the book. That's very frustrating. But at the same time, I really like her still as a character because of this sort of stuff, that she immediately is like, no, this is my responsibility. This is my fault. I decided to bring her on this quest and she died. I wasn't able to save her. Like, she is like the one like adult sort of figure, even if she looks like she's 14 all the time, that is taking full responsibility in the way that adults are supposed to about their like kids that they're around. She's like, yeah, I'm the one who put her in this position and I should have protected her, and I didn't. This, just because this was like your plan that she did, doesn't mean that it's your responsibility. Is actually mine. And it was like refreshing to hear that, because she's like the only one that does that. That is like an immortal being that like immediately takes responsibility. And I think this is the part when she like references the whole thing about
Heracles, yeah.
Lily's whole.
Yeah, so what's interesting is also how Rick shoehorns the mythology in. So Percy starts asking her about Riptide specifically. And he's like, you made this, didn't you? He starts asking her about her mother. She said, yeah, my mother was Pleione. I had 5 sisters. We were the Hesperides. I betrayed my family and helped a hero. You won't find that in the legend either. He never spoke of me. After his direct assault on Ladon failed, I gave him the idea of how to steal the apples, how to trick my father, but he took all the credit. So that is where where Rick kind of explains why Zoe isn't in any of the mythology. And I thought that was an interesting way to put it, because it's an unspoken thing that like we don't necessarily talk about with history unless we're trying to be critical of it, which is that history is written by the victors. It's written by the people who won things, the people who had the achievements. So yeah, Heracles, like having a helper but not giving her credit could feasibly be something that happened.
Yeah, and I like this part because she just like assumes kind of that Percy would be somebody that would like want to be like her.
Yeah. Don't all boys want to be just like him, is what she said.
And he's like, no. And he's like the one kind of hero person that wouldn't want to be like somebody like that. That wouldn't look up to somebody just because they're like a known hero. That would kind of make him be suspicious of them, honestly.
Yeah.
That's just not what he would ever do. And I think it's interesting because already in this quest, there's the part when, you know, the Nemean lion dies and she's like, oh, you can take it. And he's like, isn't that yours? And he like doesn't want to take it. And she's like, no, you're the one who killed it. So you get like the reward. Like she has to convince him to take it. And it's like, yeah, because he isn't one that's like that. He doesn't want to like take all the credit if it's not actually him. He doesn't even want to take credit when it is actually him.
Exactly.
And it's like, this is like the start, I think, of Zoe realizing that Percy is not who she thought he was.
Like in other circumstances, this would be a very healing person for her to meet.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not other circumstances, and they are being followed by monsters and still being followed by skeleton demons. Which leads us into the Hoover Dam. Yeah. So they that's the end of the line that they can go on. They were in ships being we said this, but we didn't actually say so Percy thought he can control the ships, but then they run into naiads who decide that they'll push the ships along. Mm-hmm. And so naiads split up and take the ships, but they stop at the dam because like that is the end of the line. There's no more water for them to get to. And this is where you can see the team, the group is just so tired and done that like they're at the point of being tired where they're just like silly, which is a mode that kids definitely get in. You know, it's like so overtired that everything becomes funny or a joke, or they just can't do anything seriously anymore.
Especially when this is something that definitely happens when like somebody, like something really sad and like sad in your life happens and everyone gets like really emotional for a while. You do kind of have these moments where like something that isn't actually that funny suddenly becomes like the funniest thing in the entire world to you. Like when my dad died, when we went to go say like goodbye to him, my sister and I, when we got back home, we went to a Taco Bell because we were like, we weren't hungry, but we knew that we were supposed to eat. And we go to the Taco Bell and my sister starts like interrogating the Taco Bell employee because they have like Dr. Pepper as like a slushy thing, but they don't have it as like a soda. And that's her favorite soda. And so she was like, why don't you have it as a soda, but you have it in this? And the guy is trying to answer her. And I just like could not stop laughing next to her that she's sitting there interrogating this guy about, and he's having to explain to her the different sorts of syrup that they use. And like, we didn't even know what we were doing because we just said goodbye to our dad who was about to die. And so we were like listening to like One Direction on the way home to try to make ourselves not cry, to listen to like overly happy music. And and so we were just like sitting there like in the car just like laughing hysterically at us interrogating the Taco Bell employee, and we're like, that guy probably thinks that I'm a crazy person. And we were just like could not stop laughing about that, and we still bring it up sometimes and start laughing about like every time my sister's like, hey, do you remember Taco Bell? And I just start laughing, and my mom is like, what? Because she wasn't there for that. So yeah, this whole like dam scene, like we're gonna go to the dam, we're gonna go to the damn snack bar, and we're gonna get a damn burrito, and everything is damn, and Zoe being like, I don't understand what any of you are saying, was just like the exact thing they all kind of needed to just have like, you need like a break once you go through something really sad like this to just kind of laugh, because you're gonna lose it if you don't.
Yeah, and especially because like their first thoughts when they get to the Hoover Dam are Annabeth should be here. Like they all three of them, Grover, Talia, and Percy, are spouting off facts that they know because of Annabeth just info dumping about architecture. And so yeah, when Zoe finally says something that's accidentally funny, which is like, where is the damn like the damn shop or something like that, they all just go with it until all of a sudden like Percy recognizes that Bessie is around, and he's like, wait a second, the cow. And Dahlia's like, the damn cow. Yeah, she's still like carrying on with it, and they're like, wait, a cow?
And like I like how Grover notices that Percy looks like scared, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'll be fine. Just like, go into the damn snack bar and go eat something." And they're like, "Okay."
Yeah.
I just think I still will forever think that it is the funniest thing in the entire fucking world that Artemis and the hunters are like trying to find this thing everywhere, and this thing loves Percy and is like literally here to try to be like, jump on my back so I can save you from the skeletons that want to kill you because I love you. I love you, boy. None of the girls. I love you because you saved me and you're a nice little boy. And so I'm gonna show up. And he like tries to, of course, like protect it by like not wanting anyone else to know that it's there. But it's just like a cute thing that it shows up being like, I'm trying to help you.
Yeah.
And it's like, but I can't actually leave with you because nobody else knows about you. I'm not going to jump onto the cow and just leave.
Yeah, and he's like, I almost feel like I should follow it because he can't understand this cow. This cow is older magic than like his dad even. So he can't understand it at all. And he's like, I know it wants me to follow it, but like, I don't know why it wants me to follow it or what it wants me to follow it to. So I'm not going to leave my group right now. But of course, right after this encounter is when he gets stuck with a tour group, and then he realizes that the skeletons are there.
Yeah, and just like the most like chaotic experience of just trying to like run in elevators and get away from it before it could kill him. But also being like still like strung out and tired, so not really knowing what he's doing. Like he's like, I'm just doing something. I'm just running. I don't know where I'm going or what I'm doing or who's around me or anything. I'm just doing this, I guess. The one thing, of course, is that he notices that the person in the elevator with him that says like one of those cryptic lines, that he notices that it's someone with gray eyes, which is meant to be Athena.
Yes, yeah. Which like gray-eyed Athena is how she is described all of the time in mythology. So that is right away like my underlines from the first time I read it, underline Athena right next to it.
Yeah. And it is like it's interesting on this quest to see the ways that the gods like intervene without like actually intervening, because they're not supposed to, but they just kind of pop in to try to help them in ways that they can without getting in trouble with Zeus, basically.
Yeah, and she's like, you can find a way out if you're smart enough.
Yeah. And like I always appreciate them Rick writing ways that make sense for Percy's character to notice things. Like he's a very like because of his like abuse background, he observes people. And so most of the things that he figures out is by watching people. And so he is somebody that would figure out that it was Athena because of the color of her eyes and things like that. Other people like Thalia would have figured out that it was Athena because of something else. But that's the reason, that's the way that he's going to notice and realize like, I think that was Athena. But it's also like so chaotic that he doesn't even have time to like even think about that and just be like, was that Annabeth's mom? Is that the way I'm meeting Annabeth's mom for the first time? Is like that. The scene with like Rachel and him.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Okay, so what happens to get these two together is he's running from skeletons, he hears a noise, and then he pulls out Riptide and he slashes at the noise. It turned out to be this girl sneezing. But for whatever reason, she is able to see past the mist, and she could tell Riptide is an actual sword. So Percy tries to like Jedi mind trick her because he's like, wait, Talia could do this thing where she manipulates the mist. And so he says, I concentrated hard and snapped my fingers. You don't see a sword. And it's just a ballpoint pen. She blinked. No, it's a sword, weirdo.
Yeah. This scene is like the most chaotic scene because he's like, he does not understand and what's going on, and he's way too tired and strung out to like really take the time to really think about it. It's like somebody just died and now he's in danger, so he's just scared that he's gonna die too. But it just cannot sit there and actually have a conversation with her. And so he almost attacks her because he's afraid of her. Then like does like the weirdest, like if you saw somebody do that stuff, you'd be like, what? Who are you?
Yeah.
Like, why are you the weirdest person alive? And it was just like the strangest interaction of his life. And he is just like, who am I? What am I doing? Why is this ginger girl giving me attitude in this weird place? Why is she judging me? Like, I just don't want to die.
And also, why can she see everything?
Yeah, like what, how is this possible that she can see things that nobody else can see and is like not fazed by the fact that he's just running around with a sword?
And that he's being chased by Skeletor guys. Like, and so, yeah, Rachel ends up coming in clutch because even though she's also just as confused by what's happening and is like, why is this boy with a sword down here? She's like, you know, maybe you should go hide in the bathroom. And then she plays with the fake security guards, which are the skeleton guys, by saying, oh, there was this weird boy with a sword down here. He went that way.
And it's like the fact that she just does that without even like thinking about it anymore. She's just like, sure,
yeah,
let's go with it.
Yep. So then Percy makes his way back to everybody. They're at the damn snack bar with their damn burritos. And when he tells them what happens, Grover comes up with what he says a brilliant, totally Grover-like idea, which is he throws his like guacamole grande burrito at this skeleton and its head falls off. It also results in because he shouted, I think he shouted burrito fight before doing this, and the cafe is currently filled with a bunch of children, so it sends off a chain reaction where there's just burritos flying around this snack bar now.
Damn food fight.
A damn food fight, yes. Which gives them a good opening to kind of get away. And that's when Percy remembers the statues. So these are actual statues at Hoover Dam, if you ever go there. They are winged, like angel-looking things. And when I looked this up earlier today, there's not a lot of meaning behind the statues. It's like, you know, a tribute to the human engineering that went into the Hoover Dam. Mm-hmm. So it's just vague enough that I think that's why Rick can get away with being like, actually, those are a monument to Zeus that Athena made, or that Athena is responsible for. Mm-hmm. And because Athena had said this line when she passed by Percy of like, you can get out if you're smart enough, and Percy remembers Talia saying, those are a tribute to my dad. When he finds her, he's like, hey, can you ask your dad for help? Which she has the same reaction any demigod is probably going to have, which is like, he doesn't really answer me, so I don't know how that's going to help. Yeah,
and
because
just ask anyway, and especially I like appreciate the way that he's like confusedly saying like why do you think it's going to work this time? And he's like, I think because Athena told me to, and she's like, what? Like, what do you mean? And it's like, and he's like, just try it for the love of God.
Yes.
And this one time it actually works.
Let's see. So she prays to her dad, and when the skeletons are closing in, I believe the angels wrap their wings around them like shields, because these skeletons have guns, like actual mortal guns. Yeah. So yeah, let's see. So they're able to get away after that because they disassembled when the angels, like, I guess they smashed them with their wings. Let's see. And then, so Talia's actually able to speak to the angels. This is the part where I, like, kind of skimmed over this a little too fast. And she asks them, can you get us out of, or she says, get us out of here. And they're like, can we get a please? She's like, yes, come on, please.
And they're like, are you Zeus's daughter? And she's like, yes. And they're like, fine.
Yeah. So that is how they are able to escape this. They flew straight up over the dam, skeleton warriors shrinking in the distance. So the statues just up and fly away with them in their arms. And that's the end of what we read for this one.
Just so much happens. Yeah, the Bianca one is always really hard. I was like really dreading having to read this the whole time we were reading this book. Since I wouldn't just like dissociate it out of my brain immediately afterwards. But yeah, at least it ends with the damn snack bar. And damn this and damn that and damn everything. One of my favorite things about Rick Riordan is that in every fucking book going forward, anytime he writes damn, it's always spelled like damn. Like D-A-M, damn.
Yeah.
And like there's even some times, I'm pretty sure I remember this happening in the Heroes of Olympus books, where Percy and Annabeth say damn and the other kids are like, what? When like they're saying it in a way that doesn't really make sense, and they're like, what are you saying? And they just like keep going as if nothing ever happened. And like even in like the other books, like the Magnus Chase book and stuff, if anyone ever says damn, it's always spelled D-A-M. There's even like an account called like the damn like Percy Jackson like meme page, and it's spelled D-A-M, the damn Percy Jackson meme page.
Yeah, so this is like one of those like fandom things that I think is just so hilarious, because the Hoover Dam is not like a fun place. No. If you ever go there, it's boring as fuck. Like, I know you've been there, but I'm saying for anyone listening, there's not really much there. I went once as a kid, and I remember being bored to tears. So the fact that Rick
I've never actually been there. I would think it would be fun to see it just to see it, but it's also just this thing of like they're all kind of delirious, and they're all also like sad that they're there when Annabeth isn't there. And she's like the one that would like love to see this. And of course, the one time that they end up going there, she's not there. And so what else can you do but make ridiculous jokes that Zoe doesn't understand?
Yeah. But I feel like this, at least for Grover and Talia, is probably awakening in them more of a desire to see out the Annabeth portion of this quest. Because that was not their focus. Like, yes, both of them cared about it. But the fact that Percy's been able to connect the dots and be like, okay, the reason we're here at all is because of whatever's happening with Annabeth and this general person and Luke. So I think for them, it's giving them a little bit more of a reason to go forward, just being reminded Annabeth is still out there, and we got to save her so she could see this one day even.
Yeah, and especially the idea that like her mom showed up to try to help them. It means that she obviously is like trying, that Annabeth is still alive. If Athena is doing stuff like this to try to help them be able to save her faster. I don't think that Thalia knows that he's having like nightmares about Annabeth at this point. And so it would be like a thing that if she doesn't know that, then yeah, it would almost be like a reminder for her of like, oh right, like Annabeth is like alive out there, like don't give up on her yet. We have to try to save her just as much as we'll try to save Artemis. And even more, like, granted.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was definitely chapters where I like sat there looking at the book afterwards, where I was like, this is a children's book series. And that's like some of the most emotional shit that I've read in books in a while. Like when I read it back in the day and when I read it again now, of the way that he handles like what happened with Bianca, and like without giving anything away, one of the things that I like about this sort of thing is sometimes book series like this, they have like people die, and it almost feels like sometimes they're dying for almost like the shock value in a way that like their death is like dramatic or horrible in the moment, but you don't like see like there's nothing that like comes out of it exactly. Like they die and the audience is sad, but there isn't like long lasting effects to like their death. But Bianca dying this way has like really long-term effects for like multiple characters that affects like the whole story of these books. And even in like the Heroes of Olympus books, like Nico is still thinking about her and still wants to like somehow like see her in some way in like the underworld and things like that. And she is still kind of like this figure that is always like haunting Nico and Percy as like the books go along. Even though it's been like 5 or 6 books since anyone's seen her, she still has like an effect on the things that they do and the way that they think about quests, and just like the knowledge that they have now that kids that young will die on quests like this, that like not every time will they like find a way to get out of it, that is possible. And when this is like a book where Annabeth is being kidnapped and being tortured, it just like makes you almost like more nervous about like what's going to happen for the rest of the book, because if she can die, then like other characters can die too.
Yeah, like Bianca is somewhat low stakes for me, or she was the first time that I read it, to the point where this death scene wasn't as memorable for me. In fact, like when I look at my actual highlighting and notes that I took the first time that I read it through, I was like, well, lost doesn't mean dead. So, you know, I was in denial the first time that I read it as well. But it's more to do, like, her death serves a higher purpose in like who Percy is, like narrative wise, like not her as a person, but like narrative wise, it shows that like Percy really did want to keep that promise to Nico. It meant something to him. It meant something that Nico put that pressure on him to begin with, of like, well, shit, now I gotta fulfill this. And you know, even Bianca, someone who is in his life for such a short time, losing her was just as hard as losing anybody else. Mm-hmm. And so it's character building for Percy in that sense, in a narrative sense. And this does, as you said, it sets up conflict with Nico that goes on books and books after this.
Yeah. And it's also a thing of like, it shows kind of like the brutality of the world, in the way that like we're talking about how Bianca is like this young kid that she never really fully understood what she did, that Artemis but just like put her in this position really by just like going to like her weaknesses and doing shitty grooming like that, and ended like this. And it's one of those sad things to remember that she's only 2 years younger than Percy. Yeah. And like there's like a part in like the chapters we read last week where he just casually is like, I'm not going to worry too much about that because I might be dead next week. Mm-hmm. And he just says it. So you're 14 and you're sitting there thinking about how things like that don't matter because you might be dead soon anyway, so who cares? Yeah. And it's like Percy is not like this adult. He's 14 and he's seen as like the more mature one with Bianca, but he's 14. He's 14 and he's sitting there telling Bianca like, you need to take this seriously because otherwise we're gonna die. And it's like, these are 2 children like sitting there talking about how they did because they took a tiny little figurine. Hephaestus is just gonna like smite them off of the map because they took a tiny little figurine. It's like, that figurine does not matter. And now she is dead because of a mythomagic figure. Like, was that really worth like her entire life?
Yeah, and Nico would much rather have his sister than that last figurine that was part of his collection.
Yeah. And it's just a thing of like, are you guys really like just not, like, by you guys I mean like the gods, like you're not like looking at things for like the individual thing. Like if anyone takes anything at all, they just deserve to die, no matter what it is. Like if they took like a giant refrigerator, they would have gotten the same punishment as they did of a tiny little D&D figure. And it's like, there is something wrong here where you feel like you can just take out a little kid like that because they took something from you. And it's like, but it doesn't even matter. And it's like, they don't even have time to think about stuff like that because of everything else that's going on. They literally like can't stop and think about it because there's too many things happening. But it's just those like natural sort of circumstances of a world like this that's so like kill or be killed, that a 12-year-old kid would be sacrificed like this. And then nobody even has time to like, even like, you know, in like TV shows or like in Star Wars, even when like Anakin's mom died, he had like a little angsty funeral for her where he like sat out with like fire and looked at it like he wanted to murder it because he murdered a bunch of people. Like before that, his little angsty funeral. Or even like, you know, Darth Vader having his little funeral in Return of the Jedi with Luke, or other things like that where, or even like in Hunger Games when Rue dies, Katniss gives her like a little version of a funeral. They don't even have time to do that. They don't even have a body to even try to do that, and they don't have time to stop long enough to even have a metaphorical funeral for her. They just immediately have to like keep going, and it's just like that is like just so brutal that that's just like what they're expected to do.
Yeah.
When they were being attacked by like these skeletons, it reminded me of like season 6 of Buffy, where like she comes back from being in heaven, and the world like being back here where she has to do all these violent things are like so overwhelming to her that she can't handle it anymore. And it like reminded me of that sort of feeling that they were all having of this like horrible violent thing just happened to us that we haven't even had time to deal with yet, and there's already other things attacking us. Can everyone just like leave us alone for 10 minutes to like give us a chance? Like at least on the giant statues they can like have like a nice little timeout when Thalia isn't having a heart attack about being in the air. And they can have like a nice little break from that for a little while. But that's like the overwhelming feeling I get about this book in general, is how all these things just keep happening to them and they don't have time to think about any of it because everything else is going wrong. And they're somehow expected to just deal with all of it and make the right decisions all the time. And it's like, of course they're not going to sometimes.
Yeah, and like, to be clear, Zoe and Grover, yes, they are older in age, but not necessarily. Like, we don't know what type of maturing actually happens after someone becomes a hunter, whether it's like Twilight vampires and they're not expected to change at all, even mentally, or whether it's like, you know, she does keep aging mentally. And Grover, he is old, but he's older than the kids, but he is a young satyr.
Yeah. Like, he's more like, when it comes to like maturity level, he's closer to like Percy's maturity of being like a teenager, in the way that even though he's chronologically older, he's at the same like kind of stage of life as like Annabeth and Percy and Thalia and stuff, where they're at that age where they're wanting to be independent and wanting to prove themselves, but because they haven't yet, nobody like really is sure if they actually could do it. Like how people don't think that he can find Pan because no one ever has, and they don't think that he's good enough to do it. That's exactly the sort of stuff that like every teenager deals with, of people like questioning the things you want to do because they are like, you're too young to like know what you really want to do kind of thoughts or whatever. And they're all kind of in that same place, even if they're thousands of years old when it comes to Zoe.
Yeah.
Still kind of at the same maturity level. I don't know how to put this. She's at the same maturity level of Percy, but that means that you're like outwardly a teenager and inwardly like 700 years old.
Yeah.
Because like that's what I was like when I was a kid growing, like walking around. I was like chronologically I am 12, but inside my own head I feel like I'm a 35-year-old like mother of two, with like the things that I was worried about and the ways that I was looking at people, even if I was also 12. And so I don't know what their maturity level really means.
Yeah, thematically, well, in this book, the hunters is kind of a way to run away from problems, which again comes up at the end. It's a way for people to escape their problems. And so Zoe, essentially, I think what we're supposed to get from this is she has been running away from what is a larger family issue that's going to be put in her face by the end of this book.
Yeah, like her whole story of like, everyone in my family said that I betrayed them, but I really didn't. I just tried to help somebody who ended up like stealing something from us and then like took all of the credit from me. So I did all of that for somebody who didn't even like respect me. Like that's a very scapegoated story, and we do that with people all the time. That like we do things to help them and they just like screw us over, and we're just left there being like, why did I do all of that? Now I don't have anybody. So she's just been like running away from having to think about that ever since that happened, which like I can understand that thought. But at some point something's gonna happen, and at this point it's like, okay, like the person that you're gonna have to like replace you perhaps if something goes wrong with you and your dad is gone, and so now you really have to save Artemis. like, really? Because there isn't another person to back you up here in case something does go wrong with your dad.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I gotta get William to bed, so we can leave it there for next week. The chapters named, I always take out my bookmark and then do this. Let's see. So we would be on 15.
I'm laughing at the next chapter title. I wrestle Santa's evil twin.
Yes.
I legitimately have no idea what that. I don't know what anything means anymore. So that I'm just like, I don't know what that means. And then
we need the dragon of eternal bad breath.
I didn't even remember that there is a dragon in this book.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll read those for next week. We'll keep you guys updated on show news, and remember to not give in to the rumors about these kids and let them live their lives.